All right. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Antler&FeatherCo Podcast, the podcast for new and adult onset hunters. My name's Vince, and on this show, I, a newer, inexperienced hunter, bring people on who know a whole heck of a lot more about hunting than I do. And as I learn new things and I ask them questions, I just want to pass that information right along to you guys. So, Happy New Year, guys. By the time you're hearing this, it's going to be 2023. I can't believe how fast 2022 went by. The deer season for me is over on the 10th, and it has absolutely just flown by. I was not able to get in the woods nearly as much as I would have, but the times that I did get into the woods, I was able to capitalize, thank God, and shoot a couple deer. I still technically have a few days I could fill that buck tag. You know, it's not over till it's over, so we'll see what happens with that. Before we get going too far in the show, let me share a couple of the friends of the show with you guys. First and foremost, Buzzard Roost Saddles. If you guys haven't got one yet, it's a little late in the season, but it's never too late. It's a good time for you to get a saddle, get yourself ready on the off season to practice in it, get comfortable in it. Buzzard Roost saddles are the most comfortable. They're super adjustable. They're the best saddle that I've ever sat in. I've spent some time in my Buzzard Roost this season, and I absolutely love it. If you guys want to get one of your own, use code AAFP10. That's going to get you 10% off your very own saddle. You will not regret it. I promise you. Secondly, Our Grounds Coffee Co. Our Grounds Coffee Co. is the official coffee of the Antler&FeatherCo podcast. Like I told you guys before, it keeps me going. It keeps the podcast fueled, especially in these cold temperatures. It's been negative 40 wind chill where I'm at in Iowa. We got snow on the ground. It's just been miserable. So nothing helps you get your day going better than a hot cup of coffee, especially when it tastes amazing. You guys go check them out. If you're more of a dark roast type of person, you're going to go for Muley Mayhem. It's very, very good. And if you like a medium roast, then we got Roast Develop. That's my personal favorite. If you guys use code all caps AFCO, that's going to get you 15% off your coffee order. And finally, Spartan Forge. Even though the season's winding down, we're never truly in an off season. We're going to be doing a lot of postseason scouting. We're going to be doing spring scouting. If you're a turkey hunter, which you should be because it's the best hunting in the world, you're going to want Spartan Forge to help you find those places you need to be. You can mark them down on your map. You can do predictions. You can do everything with the new features with topographical shading. You can raise the topo map and everything in the app so you can see the contours and what they actually look like. I don't really see why you wouldn't want to use Spartan Forge. I see Onyx, and I'm not throwing any hate, but you can do that in your car now. But I think you should spend more time in the field than driving around in your car looking at your map. That's my personal opinion. Spartan Forge is going to do that for you. Use code all caps AFCO for 20% off your subscription. Get yourself going to Spartan Forge. You can try it for free, but you're going to end up loving it. You're going to end up wanting the full subscription. So again, use that code all caps AFCO for 20% off. Go to their website, and that is how you're going to do that. All right, guys. So on this week's podcast, we're going to talk to one of my buddies that I met at Total Archery Challenge last year, and we've kept in touch ever since. He's got a really cool company called Morr Innovations, and what he does is he creates things using 3D printing for guys who are working on their own bows and things like that. He's got what's called the Easy Caddy. He's got a thread caddy. He's got other things that keep all of your parts, all of your thread, everything you're using when you're working on your bow and your bow press, keeps it all in one spot. It's super helpful, really cool stuff. He also has cool things like a pen holder that looks like a grenade. He's got like 3D printed stickers. They're really, really cool products. And I wanted to catch up with him and kind of talk to him about that. I don't know anything about 3D printing, but I think it's some cool stuff that you guys can use, especially if you're working on your own bows. I also just want to kind of catch up with him, see how his hunting season's gone. I know he put down a really good buck. He was featured on the AFCO Semi-Pro team. You guys probably saw that earlier on. So with that, let's not draw this intro out. Let's get into it. Please help me welcome to the show, Kyle Morrow from Morr Innovations. Kyle, what's going on, man? How you been?
Pretty good. Finally got through the cold weather.
Did you guys get negatives like we have here?
Yeah, so I think real feel was like negative 35. Actual temperature was like negative 13 or something like that.
Jeez.
But I think today, looking at the computer, we're at 21, so heat wave.
Yeah. So it's like Speedo weather now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. You know, my kids have obviously, talking to you, my kids have been sick for a while here, and they're finally getting through it. And as this huge cold front came in and we were going, I think we hit like -40 or something like that with wind chill, they're seeing all the snow coming with it. And they obviously want to go play in the snow. And it's like, you will like freeze and die the minute you step outside. I'm sorry, guys, you can't go out there. So the closest thing we got, I took the little the cup of boiling water trick outside, and I put a video out of that. But that was about as close to being outside. I think they're getting tired of being cooped up in the house and having to take medicine and stuff. It definitely makes us want, and we'll talk more about it. Guys, I actually met Kyle at Total Archery Challenge last year, and it really, really, this cold weather makes you want to get back to those times when it's nice and you're sweating your butt off hiking a hill. You think you're in good shape until you have to go 60 yards up, 60 yards down, 60 up, 60 down. But yeah, I can't wait for that. I'm definitely not outside practicing for it right now, though. I'm also just getting over something, but we'll get there. So what kind of stuff you been having going on? We'll talk a little bit more. You've had a pretty good hunting season in terms of whitetails. You put down a good buck. Is your guys' season over yet, or are you guys coming close?
Man, what is it? It's like it's usually the first weekend of January is the end of it for archery. So October 1 all the way till that first weekend of January. So getting down the last couple of days here. Yeah,
we end on January 10th. I can't remember now, but I think we had gun season in the beginning of December, and I think last week late archery just opened back up. So it didn't really, that cold weather came in right when our late archery season opened. So it's like I could not wait until gun season was over, because this year I didn't partake in gun season. I don't know. I don't have as much fun with it. Personally, I think it's cool if you're into gun hunting, and it was cool to see everyone put down, big bucks with their gun seasons, but I just didn't really want to go out for that this year. And then the minute it was like, all right, back to archery, it's like -40. I don't have the equipment or the gear to wear to stay warm in that. And even if I did, I don't know that I'd even still want to be out in that stuff. Did you get out for gun season at all this year?
No, so I've been strictly archery hunting for the last 5 or 6 years now. But and before that, mostly muzzleloader hunting prior to that. Just because here in Indiana, it's a little bit different. Well, it's changed recently, but when I started, it was gun season, muzzleloader season. And you could use a muzzleloader during gun season, but it was pretty much a shotgun or muzzleloader. Yeah. And so that's why I started with muzzleloader, because he had 2 seasons that you could utilize there. But since, they've opened it up to rifle, they originally it was like handgun rounds that were of a certain caliber and bigger. And then now they've opened it up to, I don't even know. Like I don't gun hunt, so I don't even pay attention to what calibers, but essentially it's a pretty wide range. I mean, you can grab Grandpa's 270 and go hunting now.
Yeah, I think in Iowa we're able to. I think this year we also made a change where I am not sure what calibers, so I could be dead wrong. So guys in Iowa, if I am wrong, feel free to message me and tell me to shut up, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I did notice people were out with their ARs this year. I know they expanded. We were like, you could only use straight wall cartridge rifles, which again, I don't gun hunt either really, so I don't know what those included, but I did see guys out with their ARs, and it's like, it's nice in a way, because now we can, say, hey, they're not just weapons of war. Like, we hunt with these things, and it's cool. It's cool to see guys who are passionate about that get out there and be able to use those and capitalize on those during those seasons. I'd probably be a lot better off if I would have gotten into gun season, but just the only thing I use gun for is turkey, because I firmly believe God created a turkey to be shot by a shotgun. I don't know, those guys that archery hunt turkeys, I don't know how the hell they do it. I have a couple buddies that like to do it in a blind, but I also know a couple guys who killed turkey without a blind with a bow. I'm like, I have no idea how you were able to draw on a turkey and pull that off, but Anyway, before we get going in too far, I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then we will jump into kind of your general hunting background and then talk about your cool company, and we'll get going with that. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Lord Jesus, this past week we celebrated the day of your birth. I can't imagine this world without you. I can't imagine had you not come down, put on flesh, left behind all of your riches in heaven to come down and basically save all of us sinners. Without that choice on your part, I just, with as crazy as the world is right now, I can't imagine what it would look like. So we want to thank you so much for coming down and saving us, for taking our sin, taking our punishment. There's no reason you needed to do that. And just out of a pure act of love, you wanted to come down and save your people. And because of that, I can freely worship you. I can, talk about you. I can have a relationship with you. And Lord, I want to glorify you through this podcast first and foremost. I want people to understand that is the number one priority of this show, is giving you just another tool to reach more people. So Lord, do your thing, reach people however you need to through this show. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. I thank you for Kyle. I thank you that we're finally able to link up. It's been a long time coming with sickness and kids and things like that. We've just had to reschedule over and over and over. And I'm thankful that we could finally do this and that he would spend an hour of his time with me. And we just ask that you be over this conversation, make it entertaining. Hopefully we can learn some things, and ultimately, hopefully you can reach some of your people and bring them in. And Lord, we ask all this in your name. Amen.
Yeah.
All right. So kind of just to kick off, because this is a hunting show, what is your general hunting background? How did you start? And why do you love hunting to this day and keep doing it?
Yeah. I didn't start hunting until after, right at the end of high school. So, I believe you and I've got some other common interests. I wrestled from when I was in first grade all the way up to the senior year. Obviously you started conditioning there at late summer and whatnot. And that was my focus in life, that. And, I grew up on a farm, worked on in farming my entire life. And so from one busy season right in the wrestling, I always had interest. It just never worked out. So basically, as soon as wrestling season wrapped up senior year, I hopped right into deer hunting. I'd gone out a few times as a kid with my dad, never brought a weapon with me. I was just too little. But at least went and sat in the tree stand, whether it's with him or a tree stand that was, 15, 20 yards away or something like that. And always really enjoyed it. Because that traditional, deer camp type feel that I don't think you really see as much anymore. It was my dad and his buddy, and, they hunted, like 45 minutes away, and, we'd go out there and we have a camper, and we were camping inside of a barn, right? So it wasn't anything rough, but, it's just the camaraderie and all that stuff. And I just enjoyed it as a kid. I was just a little kid with all these adults and whatnot. And, I've always loved nature growing up. So just sitting in a tree stand, being able to observe nature and them not knowing you're there, and just be able to see their natural movements and reactions and what they do was always just enjoyed it. It was kind of a, I don't know, just a peaceful time, and so that still carries through today. And, before we started the show, we were talking about hunting a little bit, of course. And when I started, it was muzzleloader, because I'm located here in Indiana. And when I started, it was basically a muzzleloader and shotgun for guns anyways, for hunting. Since then, it's changed. Now you're able to use like handgun rounds of a certain caliber and rifle rounds. But so started with muzzleloader because you're able to hunt two seasons. So you had a gun season, muzzleloader season. You could use muzzleloader for both. And so that's where I started. Dad, I had a hand-me-down Remington 700 muzzleloader. It's one, I don't know how long they made that gun for, but it's kind of a lesser known. but it's still cool because it's a 700, right? It's iconic.
Yeah.
Still have it today. If I ever get frustrated, that'd be the first thing I'd pull out of the gun cabinet still. Because here in Indiana, we get to some pretty rural areas, but you get some pretty small tracts of land. So really a muzzleloader, 120 yards is really all you need. But anyway, so yeah, I hunted several years strictly with muzzleloader. And then I got more into archery, sometime after I got married, saved up some money for a bow. It was a missions venture. So it was that budget bow, single cam, it's made by Matthews and whatnot. Used that for several years, and then what's it been, 3 years now? Purchased an RX4 Ultra, and I've been using that for the last 3-4 years, and I think 5 or 6 years, something like that, been strictly archery. Just thoroughly enjoy it. One of my favorite memories is still gun hunting. My dad and I were gun hunting. We're on opposite ends of this piece of property, and within literally 30 seconds of each other, we both shoot and we both get bucks, and just,
That's awesome.
really, really cool, just story that him and I have. And he still brings it up from time to time, even though he doesn't go into the woods anymore. But I just, the challenge of archery hunting, and getting close to deer, I've never had my heart thump so hard, hunting gun as I ever did,
Right.
Archery hunting, just that closeness. I was actually having a conversation last night, Christmas, and with a relative, and I was like, yeah, I go, thinking about it, I was like, every deer I've shot, buck or doe, has been 12 yards or under. I mean, so You're right there with them.
Oh yeah.
And so it's just, for me personally, I just can't replace that same feeling with a gun. So whether that means I go without a buck, for the year, so be it. I usually get a deer a year, doe or buck or both. And, so it's, I don't know. And then also too, I just enjoy shooting archery. When I was a kid, I don't know, I was in elementary school at some time, got one of those, I think it might've been, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a kid's bow, and basically had the old brass pins with a fixed shelf on it and stuff, and being out in the country and growing up on the farm, we always had round bales around, so that was always our backstop, and shooting 10-15 yards. And my dad had a bow. Then I got another one that was actually like a regular compound, one that I only know what it's like, a 30-pound bow maybe. Still got it, which is pretty cool. But use that, it wasn't big, they didn't have enough poundage for archery, and I wasn't a good enough shot anyways to even archery hunt with it. So, I grew out of that, and that was from then until when I got that mission. I never shot in between there, but I still enjoyed it as a kid. And so it was kind of getting back to where I started as a kid, and enjoying that process of shooting pretty much year round, except for when it's, negative 35 degrees outside.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
I enjoy it, like I work from home, we were talking about that. I work remote for my job, and, I get an hour for lunch. So, I can inhale food and go get 30 minutes of, shooting the bow, get a little break from work and stuff. So I just, I don't know, just enjoy shooting archery, and just, even though you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, just doesn't get old.
Yeah. And I think with archery, one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is, you hear guys in the gun community, and not specifically gun hunting, but, everyone just go shoot your gun because it's just this calming, release of stress and everything else. Archery is the same exact thing, except you get to go down and grab your arrow and shoot it again, instead of wasting bullets. Although I will say, when you get into shooting longer distances, like we're talking about with Total Archery Challenge, it can also get very frustrating. But can you imagine? I was going to say, when you were a kid, you're shooting a round bale and your groups are probably like 6 feet apart. Can you imagine? Yeah. Now groups are looking like this, at 20 yards. And talking about growing up with wrestling too. I didn't grow up with a hunting family, but it's the same thing. Had I grown up in a hunting family, I don't know when you would ever, like, that's one thing I don't want to say this and sound like ungrateful for having kids, because I love my kids more than anything, but as they grow up, like my 3-year-old, I think next year I'm going to try to get him into wrestling, and your hunting season's done. Like, especially if the kid's good and wants to like really, do freestyle Greco stuff in the summer, and then you got your regular folk style in the winter and fall. And then if they're doing, national tournaments and things like that, it's like, I don't know when I'm ever going to hunt. I might have to shut this whole program down, this whole antler and feather thing down for like 18 years. But yeah, so that's cool. I think that's really cool that you still have that original bow that you had. And, you'll be able to, how you said your kids are 8 and
6.
8 and 6. Do you have those your kids shooting archery yet?
I got my daughter a bow last year. It was a diamond atomic.
Mm-hmm.
I bought it used, got new strings for it and like redid it for her and whatnot. She's only shot it a handful of times. But our kids are fairly involved. She's kind of got like ADD when it comes to doing things. She just wants to do it all.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, she's done 3 or 4 different sports throughout the year, and she's in STEAM club, and we're involved in 4-H. That's another thing. Growing up my entire life, I've done 4-H. Ironically, it's how I met my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And so like our kids are getting into that now. This is going to be our first year as an actual 4-H'er, not mini 4-H. And so we'll have animals and stuff. And so I'm not going to be that person that's going to pressure her to shoot it just because I spent all the money on it. But I want it to be there for her. And if she does decide to pick it up, I'm there to drop everything and support her for it. Or my boy, when he gets old enough big enough to be able to draw it back. But I've got something for them. It's ready to go. Funny thing is the arrows I got are the old Easton aluminum ones that I used when I was a kid, and I still had them. Yeah. And, those things, as long as you're not Robin Hood, and, they'll last forever for those old aluminum ones. And so I, refletched everything up for her and whatnot. But, when they do it, they enjoy it. She gets a kick out of it. We had, a little white foam that the old archery shop gave me that I put in front of my regular bag target, and drew a deer on there, and so she could be able to shoot, and she get a kick out of she shoots it in the head or something, but,
right.
Yeah. Of course, I wish she would shoot more, but like you said, I'm not gonna push her.
Yeah. Well, that's the quickest way to get a kid not interested in something, when you force something on them. And I mean, archery, especially, like, I can't imagine being her age and trying to focus on shooting a bow. Cause even at that age, I mean, if, at some point, like some of the 3D tournaments I did over the summer, there were guys out there with pretty young kids, and they just want to go. And they're sailing arrows over the target. And after after three targets, now the kids are frustrated because why aren't they able to hit the target like dad is? And so, it's got to be an organic thing. And, if she does grow up into it, at least she's got you there to guide her on the right path. So she'll be set up when she'll come around. And if she doesn't, hey, whatever.
Yeah, she does like to go at least hunting with me. So
does she?
So early season this year, I bought a nice big blind, and so that way with lots of room and stuff for her. But she does enjoy going out in the woods. It's one of those things I'll ask her, or she'll mention, then we'll go out and whatnot. And it's I got 5 acres, and the backside of my property is all woods. And so we can go back out there for an hour, whatever it is. And she enjoys it. She, typical, here's a squirrel jumping around. Dad, I heard a deer. I heard a deer, Dad, and and she loves nature too, which is really cool. So any sort of animal that comes, she's like sitting there observing it, and we got her own binoculars and stuff. So she's out there, glassing everything up. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's a joy. She loves to read and whatnot. So she'll bring some books and she'll read and keep herself occupied. And
that's awesome. Well, I mean, that alone is great that she loves to read. Most kids are so focused on iPads and phones and everything else. It's good to see a kid that likes to actually read.
Yeah.
So speaking of archery, you obviously archery is your jam. That's what you love to do. You were able to get kind of a little cross country this year. You went chasing some mule deer and some other stuff earlier on. How long have you been doing that, and how did you get into it?
Yeah. So mule deer, this was my first year going mule deer hunting. And how I kind of got into it was through work. I work with farmers all across the country. Became really good friends with a guy up in North Dakota, and he's in like north central North Dakota, where he's like an hour from the Canadian border. And so last year, for North Dakota, you can get archery tags for non-residents anyways over the counter. So there's no draw process or anything. So I went and got over the counter, and I went up to his place and spent, I think it was like 6 or 7 days up there hunting. Was unsuccessful, up there, huge learning curve because there's like no woods anywhere. I mean, there's like rolling hills, just wide open, and you're really kind of trying to stalk in. You're glassing from like 2 miles away, finding them, and then you're trying to hunt them down in all the little pockets of like reeds and stuff in the low points of all these rolling hills and stuff, that's where they would bed. So it was challenging. I did bounce out to some public land and found out I probably should have been on the public land the entire time, just because it was some river bottom type ground and this and that. And unfortunately, that was the last day I was up there. So I think next year, if I go back up there for whitetail, I'm just going to go straight to that public ground and hit those river bottoms. And so that's how I kind of got introduced into North Dakota in general. And so since North Dakota has the Badlands, they've got mule deer and rifle. It's like extremely hard to get a tag for mule deer rifle as a non-resident. But since I'm into archery, it's about, after having a conversation with a couple guys, it's about every 2 to 3 years, you could draw an archery tag for mule deer. And so I got lucky. It sounded like, I applied last year, got a preference point, and then this year I applied and got it, a tag. So that was pretty cool. I went out there. It was hard. I mean, it was not that hunting's easy, but it was tough because of the conditions. So I'd done a lot of research, this and that. I was like, man, it'd be awesome to get a velvet buck. They're not pressured. They're fairly low key because they're not hard horned, and the hormones and everything else not changed in them. And so, I figured it'd be a little bit easier to hunt at that time. Plus, velvet, that'd be awesome to get a velvet buck. And so I went opening weekend, which is Labor Day weekend. And I had several points picked out, but I got into some areas where there was like no pressure from hunters, but there was pressure from farmers. And so little did I know, you can't see this on the map, but you get into an area and it's all grass. You get into these grassland areas of the Badlands, and farmers, they get permits or whatever from the state, and they can graze their cattle out there. And so unfortunately, where I was at beginning, where there was no other hunters, there's cattle in there, but the ranchers are in and out of there checking on them and stuff. And so quickly, within the first day or two, I burned through like, A, B, and C spots, and that's why it's important to have just numerous, backups. And, I kind of backed out of there. I was hitting some other spots I had marked, and it was pretty highly pressured by some other hunters. Like this one area, it's like a valley, and it was like grasslands, and it dipped into a valley. And on the road, I didn't even get out of the truck. From the road, I spotted like 8 different hunters. in this valley that could effectively support like 2 hunters.
Yeah.
And so, I was just burning through spot after spot after spot. Then I just completely changed my tune or my plan. And when I just started picking some spots that looked good on the map and went like 2 hours away, and there was hunters out there, but it wasn't as many. And I was out there, and meanwhile, I had only seen like 1 or 2 does the entire time. And this is like day, 3. Mm-hmm. And one thing that really stunk was that it was 90 plus degrees when I was there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you weren't in your spot glassing at the first, speck of sunlight to be able to see through your binoculars, I mean, you only had 20 minutes maybe to be able to find them before they bed down. And so finding deer was hard because of the heat and stuff, and the pressure. Day 4, I finally got into, afternoon of day 3, that's when I moved 2 hours away. I got into an area, and beautiful area with a bunch of drainages and stuff, and ended up finding 2 bucks. Started to put a stalk. I had like half an hour before, it was actually half an hour before sundown. So I had like an hour. So I started to stalk on them, and they were bedded. But for whatever reason, they were on a east facing slope. So they had the shade first. And, half an hour before sundown, these guys already got up and started feeding out kind of across this valley. So I just watched them, hoping that, they'd stick around and I can get them in the morning, kind of find them feeding and then heading to the bed. Never did find them again. Searched all over the place the next day. Never found them. Went back to the truck, and because I was camping at the truck, and just went for a drive, just kind of looking stuff on the map. Came across these 2 guys from Wisconsin, and just said, "Hey, how's it going? You guys seen anything?" And it spurred up pretty good conversation. And come to find out, he said, "Yeah." He goes, "At every single drainage along these roads," he goes, "there's a pickup parked, prior to me being there." And then he's like, "Yeah," he goes, "the only way you're going to be able to see deer is if you probably go like 4 or 5 miles back." And I just wasn't set up for that because of just purely from water. So they were in a droughty condition up there during the summer. They had water early on, but it turned dry during the summer. And I wasn't set up with like filters and all that stuff to be able to go back there and have water, because, I was drinking over a gallon of water a day, just trying to stay hydrated. And then kind of bounced around a couple different spots, and that was really it. So, I mean, I think I've seen like 5 deer the entire time I was up there. I put probably over, I think it was a little over 40 miles total hiking. And I was actually going to be there for 7 days. I left on day 5 because the highs were in the hundreds. And so I was like, I was going to go home with my family.
Well, yeah. I mean, even assuming you do find one to chase, I mean, you're having to stalk this thing, like you said. You're glassing it from a ways away. So it's like, even if you find one worth going in on, you got a long trek ahead. Especially, I mean, I'm not really familiar with mule deer too much, but I assume you've got to be watching scent and wind and everything like that with them as well. And I mean, God, trying to chase them, you got sweating your balls off 90 to 100 degrees, trying to, manage all that at the same time and then not pass out and die in the middle of the thing,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, between the heat and putting 40 miles in, it's not like a lot of these, professional hunters, they go in the backcountry and go deep and stuff, like Snyder and all that stuff. And I, just from doing what I was doing, I had lost like 12 pounds.
Jeez.
Just in that short period of time, between water weight and, because you don't have an appetite when it's that hot.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'd eat once, maybe twice a day and have some snacks and stuff. And it was just because you don't have an appetite. And so getting towards the end, you get pretty drained from not getting enough calories and stuff. But
well, that can be dangerous all in itself.
Yeah. I did make sure I had plenty of water, though. I would force myself. I actually used, Wilderness Athlete, their Hydrate and Recover. I was drinking a lot of that during the day to help. So I never felt dehydrated because I was very cautious of that, especially, you and I know about being dehydrated, cutting weight for wrestling.
Yeah, I know a little thing or two about that.
Yeah.
So with all that said, I assume you're going to go back if you get a chance.
Yeah. I would be probably, now that I know the pressure, I've seen the areas and stuff. And I thought too, it was pretty cut up with roads. It's public ground. There's a lot of public in the Badlands, but there's quite a bit of roads, especially because of, the oil industries out there,
Yeah.
They're drilling and stuff. So they've got roads in there that you're able to go down a lot of those roads. You just can't, park at any of where those pumps are and stuff.
Right.
But you're able to park off the road anywhere you want. And so it was pretty accessible, but now knowing and seeing the hunting pressure and stuff, I would definitely suit myself up to be able to go, 4 or 5 miles deep and then set up a camp somewhere and hunt that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely go back. It's super fun. It's vast. It's gorgeous out there. And when you of course your legs always shaking when you see a buck, right? A white-tailed buck.
Yeah.
But when you see a mule deer where they're just naturally having way more horn,
even
though you could have like a small mule deer and it looks like a large whitetail just because of all the horn that they put on. And so, even though I only seen those 2 bucks that one time, it was super exciting to be out in a different environment that I've never been in before, trying something completely new. And, I'm used to, sitting in a tree stand, ambush style, and actually glassing and being on foot to pursue the animal, and that whole different approach to hunting was really fun. Even though I didn't really get, I only had the one stalk and whatnot, but just that approach was just fun to me. So yeah, I would definitely go. Some lessons learned, as any hunter is, whenever you're experienced and going to do something new, you're always going to have that first year experience trying to do a new pursuit. So I don't think I'll get to go to North Dakota next year for mule deer. I'll go for probably whitetail, but mule deer, I'll probably have to wait another 2 years or so before I can get a tag. But back to those Wisconsin guys, by the way, they were telling me all kinds of information because they had been going out there since like 2010 or something. And they're like, it's like every 2 to 3 years they drew a tag. Most of the time it was every 3. And then when they also said too, like this past year, it was the most pressure that they've ever seen in the entire time that they've been out there. So it seems like even for them, it's being a little more of a veteran, going out there, because they said they'd get, 1 to 2 stalks in a day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they said, we were lucky to get 1 in like 3 days.
Yeah.
So
well,
at least I knew I wasn't alone.
Yeah. That's got to be thanks to the internet and it's cool to watch, all these guys go out and do these hunts, but I'd be interested to like just pan back from everything and see across the board, like just I feel like even the way public land is being hunted for whitetails, it seems like, I've only been hunting for 3 years, but it seems like that's even changed to where, you notice a lot of guys for whitetail hunting, it's been preached on all the big channels, you got to go in deep, And it seems like, when I was talking to Dan Infald a while back about hunting, close to the parking lot and stuff, he had even mentioned, like now everyone's conditioned, you've got to go for whitetails, you got to go as deep into public as you can. And people are passing deer to go get to deer. And so I've tried to adopt that into my strategy of like, well, and let's let those guys go 2, 3, 4 miles in. I'll just hang out here. It's easier for me at the end of the day too. It's a shorter walk in the dark to get out of the woods. But so do you have any plans of trying to chase elk at all?
Yeah. Nothing rock solid. So that same buddy that's up in North Dakota, he really wants to go elk hunting with me. He's been a couple of times now. I think he's been twice. He's successful the first time. This year he wasn't. But he wants to go with me in the worst way. Because he's gone with some other guys and they're not a little bit more of a Gucci type hunter, so to speak,
Yeah.
And he kind of wished, I was going with him so that way someone who he doesn't have to worry about me. I'll just put it that way. You know what I mean?
Yep.
When you get in a hunting camp, you got to be able to rely on each other and whatnot. And he didn't really have that aspect this past year and whatnot. So him and I want to try and get something together, whether we've tried Montana, even just for cow, elk, not.
Yeah.
We tried to get a draw in for that as a group. I think there was 3 of us on a group because you could do a group play as a group. So that way you can all get the tag.
Nice.
Yeah, lower odds, of course, but it's nice because then you got all 3 people with a tag in their pocket.
Right.
So we were going for cow in Montana. Ended up not getting it, so I don't know what it'll be this year. What we'll try for Montana or Colorado or whatever it is, but the desire is there. Just not sure what the plans are yet.
Yeah, that's cool. So, to kind of wrap up your whitetail season, though, coming back home, you put a pretty good buck down this year. So what was the story with that guy?
Yeah, so this is actually, it's been pretty cool because pretty much most of hunting here in Indiana, I'm in the northwest part of Indiana, just for a reference. Primarily where I was hunting, I relied pretty heavily on the rut because the pieces that I have permission on, which is kind of a cool story in itself. But going back to working in agriculture, I met a farmer and he's like, these deer are tearing out my crop, blah, 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 blah. And I was like,
I know a guy.
And so, I've never paid for a lease, any of that stuff. I've never hunted on public in Indiana. I've actually hunted on public ground one time just because the wind was wrong one day on the pieces I was hunting. So I just went to public just for not to waste the day. I've been hunting these 2 pieces that are across the road, across the highway from each other for the last about 11 or 12 years now. And there's a lot of deer out there, but it's kind of open country for farm ground. And then you have a lot of like patches of woods, like 10 acre, 15 acres, patches of woods, or even just like thick tree lines. And so, the property I've been hunting, it never really held any bucks. It was like spikes or maybe some does. So I always relied on the rut to really kind of push the bucks onto the property. From that aspect of it, and that's when I would usually get them, whether it was archery or gun season. So something happened in the last couple of years that I found out. A guy on the neighboring property, I've got a 35 acre and an 80 acre. The 35 acre, I would never see any deer out there. And so I just kind of gave up on it. I was always hunting on 80. And in the last like 3-4 years, it started to change. I actually started seeing more deer on the 35. And that's where I got my first archery buck, 5 years ago now. And actually I've gotten all of my archery bucks on this little 35 acre piece of property. And what happened was that the neighboring piece to the north, the guy, his mom owned the piece. This guy was an older gentleman, probably late 40s. Come to find out, he would shoot a ton of deer and poach. He'd poach a lot of deer. And so I didn't know that, not living in the area. And I actually had one time, I had a trespasser coming from his property onto mine when I was in a tree stand. And
that's always a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was pretty frustrating. But so his mom kicked him off. Like, kicked him out. I don't know if she like disowned him or just like said, no more hunting. So since that happened, I actually been seeing a lot more deer on that 35 because that piece had a little bit thicker piece of woods on it. And so now they're actually like bedding in there, and And it's not just does, it's like actual bucks are now bedding in there and this and that. And so I've kind of, in the last 3 years, even though I've been on there for 11, I've been relearning, because the deer have completely changed how they've been using these piece of properties.
Yeah.
And so, so this year, I don't run any cameras. Not that I'm against them. I just don't have time, because it's an hour away and I'm just too cheap to invest in the cell cameras.
Yeah, I hear you.
So like, I don't run any cameras. I just go out there and hunt. And if I see something I like, I'll shoot it. So I'm not after any specific deer. And so it's always kind of a nice surprise when something pops up, you know, when you're out there. And so this year I'd hunted one time behind my house. You know, I got 5 acres and some, you know, the backside's wooded, and I hunted back there one time. Had a couple does come in and whatnot. And then the second day I hunted was, you know, down to 35 acre piece, and I got a couple ladder stands, mostly on the perimeter of the woods. You know, I hunted, had some small bucks come in, a lot of action. You know, this is October 22nd, I believe. So right before rut. And, I wanted this year, because of the last 3 years and everything's been changing, I didn't want to go out and spend a bunch of money on ladder stands and stuff and put them out there. So I was like, I had to make a decision between saddle hunting or, you know, a hang on. I went the hang on route. And so I sat the ladder stand in the morning, kind of as a observation, and kind of, it's a pinch point between two woods where they travel. And so I always see a lot of deer there. And then my plan was, because I had a south wind, to come in and scout my way in, and then set up, you know, sticks and a stand and whatnot. And I know I'm going to jump around a little bit here, but, you know, you spoke of Dan Infold and stuff, and he's real big about winter scouting or scouting during like shed season and stuff.
Yep.
So reverse to last spring, I went out there with the family and we were shed hunting. I had found some beds that I never knew were there before, because in the past I've had tree stands, you know, basically right there, and there was never any beds there. And so I'd never hunted over that area. And I found beds, you know, marked it, and I've seen all the sign. I was marking it, you know, on the app and whatnot. Love Spartan Forge, by the way. I know you're a big supporter of them too. Sure. And so I knew, because of where those beds were and stuff, and just the woods and where it got thicker and stuff, and where they would be bedded up, you know, I kind of set up based on that. And it was like, I've never had this happen to where you get a playbook from like Dan Infold or someone like that, and like most of the time it don't work, right? Just that's how hunting goes, right? It just doesn't work out. You can't control deer and what they're going to do that day, but you can, you know, be educated on how they move. And so it was like a freaking playbook, man. Like, I'm not going to lie. It was the craziest thing, because I've never had this happen before. So I scouted my way in, got to this area. It's like real thick part of the woods, but there was a natural clearing, and I had about 20 yards of only one area. That was it that I could shoot in. And so set up the tree stand. And one thing I like about being mobile and being able to choose where you want is also how high you can get. So I've been busted a lot just by pure sight. Like, I could be sitting there not moving an inch, and I'll have a doe spot me 15 foot in a ladder stand.
Right.
So I knew I wanted to get high. So I got about 25 feet high in this tree. And so I was sitting there, and this was an evening hunt, and it was like 78 degrees. So I'm sweating my butt off, you know, getting up this tree.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was probably 20 minutes before sundown, and had 2 does come in, and they were coming straight from that bedding. I mean, it's like the beginning of the playbook had started at that point. And they came in behind me. I tried to get a shot at one. It was just way too thick. So I just let them be. They're just, you know, sucking up acorns, eating, and just, they had no idea I was there, because the wind was in my favor. And then it was about, I don't know, probably about 10 minutes go by. I see a buck popped up, and he started walking through, and I was like, yeah, you know, he wasn't, I mean, I was excited. So, and he wasn't a monster by any means. But I was just super excited when he came through. And what was really cool is that, most of the time, when you're in a travel corridor or in a pinch, they're kind of cruising through, right? Head up, looking around, cruising through. And I was in a position where, they were in that staging area prior to really moving out to feed for the night. And so his head was literally down, sucking up acorns like a vacuum cleaner, man. And I was like, he's gonna come out. I was like, man, this is like, this can't get any more perfect. Like, he's gonna come out at like 15, maybe 20 yards. And I was like, that's a chip shot, And I was all excited. I'm sitting there ready, got my body positioned so I could, limit my movement and stuff. And all of a sudden he turns and then starts walking straight to me. I was like, I don't have a shot. He's coming right at me. And I was like, I'm not gonna have a shot. Luckily he came to me and then he stayed in front. And I actually had to wait for him to walk past my tree a little bit. And I got super nervous because that was the way I walked in. I was waiting for him to pick up my scent.
Oh, yeah.
But I had to wait for him to pass so I can get, somewhat of a quartering away so I can get in behind that shoulder, get in into those lungs and stuff with the shot. Well, he ended up being only like 6 or 8 yards from the tree. Jeez. And so, talk about total archery challenge and trick shots, right, man? I was like, steep angle. Like, I had a hard time, trying to find my peep and line it up with my sight. Like, I was getting pretty nervous. I was like, am I going to be able to even execute the shot? And I had a silverback too.
Oh yeah.
That was my first time hunting with a silverback because of target buck fever. Really, I was trying to use that to help combat that. And so, finally got, the peep lined up with the sight, this and that. And my pin was underneath him. I was like, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I was like, I just hope that this is low enough because of the angle. I was like, because it was going to shoot high. I was like, man, I'm just hoping that this is going to hit where I need to hit. Arrow breaks. I see it, just buries into him, just perfect behind the shoulder. He runs off like bat out of hell. And I'm sitting there, of course, sitting there shaking this and that. I'm sitting there trying to text my wife that, I just shot one, this and that. And no joke. All of a sudden, those 2 does that I mentioned earlier, they were behind me. One pops out and stops right where I shot that buck. And I was just like, yep, here we go. Put another arrow in, shoot the doe the exact same way. And she only went 20 yards and piled up behind me. And I'm just like freaking out. Like, dude, this is a playbook and I've never doubled up like this. So I was like, this is amazing. So I text my wife and my daughter calls me and she's all excited, this and that, and whatnot. And so I got really nervous because I didn't hear the buck crash. I seen the arrow. It was a really good shot. The thing about it was it was such a steep angle going down that it was like perfect behind the shoulder for placement. But you know how like the back of a deer, you got the spine and then it starts to curve off. I was like right at that curving off going down the side of the body was my entry at such a steep angle.
Yeah. And
so I got both its lungs and he ran off, but I didn't hear him crash. It's hot. I started getting nervous. I was like, I want him to lay. I don't want them to meet the spoil. I've got 2 deer now down on the ground. Right. And so get done talking to my daughter and about 15 minutes goes by. It takes me another about 10, 15 to get out of the tree and get all my stuff out of it and stuff. And it's like, well, I'm going to go get the doe because I know that one's down. So I go and drag her to the field edge, which was only like 10 yards, from where she had died, and drag her out and then automatically just start tracking that buck. And I was just scared. I wouldn't say scared. I was nervous because I didn't want to bump him if he didn't die right away. Yeah. And I couldn't find hardly any blood. And so I would see like a little bit of like a mist, every so often. And I was really just trying to see, there's a lot of foliage still because we haven't had a frost at that time. And so I was trying to see like where he kicked up the dirt off the ground. So I could see where he went because I'm not finding any blood. And I'm using a 2-inch sever. So, I've got a really good entry.
Right.
But that was the problem. Look, the only thing I could figure is when he was running and he would hit that the pressure in his cavity, you'd get like a little bit of a mist of blood that would come out. Yeah. It wasn't like drops. It was like kind of like a mist, and it was hard to find. And I was getting nervous. It was about 45 minutes to track them 300 yards, and I finally found them. And what had happened was that my arrow penetrated and went all the way through, and the broadhead had touched the bottom of his rib cage, but never exited. So his whole cavity was just full of blood, and and there was nothing coming out because of the high entry. So, everyone wants to take pictures, this and that. And I love taking pictures of the deer and whatnot. And I just automatically went into straight work mode, man. I just grabbed the antlers and I just started dragging them to the field edge, ran to my truck. It's 70 something degrees out. And luckily I could field dress pretty fast. And, I had them dressed up and went straight to the gas station and put them on ice and whatnot. But yeah, it was unreal because most of the time it's, you get a surprise as a deer is running in because they're rutting hard and then you get an opportunity at it. That's kind of been the history of my hunting, right? Yeah. And then this was a playbook of a non-rutting buck, coming out of the bedding, and the wind's perfectly in your favor and stuff. And it was crazy. And it was so fun to be able to have like that playbook just, play out perfectly in your favor and whatnot. And I've never had that happen before in the entire 14, 15 years I've been hunting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's always cool to hear the stories like that. Cause it is, really unusual for a deer to do what they're supposed to do. I mean, even when you've watched them do the same thing every day for 2 weeks. That day you go in there, they're going to change for whatever reason. Whether they're smart, whether they just happen to change up that day. It is very unusual to have it work out in your favor like that. And yeah, you say it wasn't a monster, but coming from someone like me, first of all, if it excited you, that's awesome too. I think it was a damn good buck. I was really happy for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I didn't know that you had doubled up. I mean, that just makes it that's even crazy. Like that doe's like, well, you killed my boyfriend. Kill me too. Take me. So that's nice to be able to get it all done in one shot. You got your freezer full. You got your buck on the wall. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. The buck ended up being an 8-point, and it was like it's been pretty cool too to see the genetics in that area. Probably like 5-6 years ago, you'd see a bunch of different deer, right? Different characteristics to them, and it just seems like in the last like 4 or 5 years, you're starting to see like the genetics be pretty consistent. And so like 3 years ago was my last 2020, it was my COVID buck, was the biggest buck I've ever gotten. It was an 8-point, real heavy, big 8-point. And you could take the buck I got this year and you can put it up to it and they like match.
Really?
Yes. It's
cool.
Unreal. Like they're very symmetric, typicals, and the thing too is they don't get massive. So it could be like a 4 or 5 year old deer and it's only 130 inches.
Yeah.
So I've never measured a deer before until this year, just because I was interested if it would make it like a Pope and Young.
Yeah.
And it was just short. It was like just off of my rough measurements. It was like 123 inch 8 points. So, but it was super, super happy. And I know like I make that comment like it wasn't a monster, but to me, I'm just after, what gets me excited at the moment. I'm not to that trophy phase, and I'm not set up to track deer like, seek one and stuff.
Right.
Those guys just put in so much work, to do that.
Yeah. So before we cut off of here, I want to give you a chance to explain what you do outside of your normal job. More Innovations. Now that was something that I learned about when I met you back at Total Archery Challenge. And now I don't do my own bow work yet. So really the only thing that I need to buy is your grenade cup holder or your pen holder, because that thing kicks ass. But tell us about More Innovations. So it's 3D printing, which I know nothing about. How did you get into that? And then what kind of spurred you to create More Innovations and go the route that's taken?
Yeah. So, I think I mentioned this, I work in agriculture. Prior to that, I got introduced to CAD, which is computer aided design, is what engineers use. It's kind of a generic term for what engineers use to design their stuff, right? There's many different softwares out there. It goes all the way back to 8th grade in woodshop, believe it or not. We actually made a 3D model on the computer of, a simple, it was a CD rack that we were going to make. And that was my first experience too. I enjoyed, work on the computer with that program. High school, I think I had 2 classes, that kind of expanded on that, using those programs. And so I went to engineering school, mechanical engineering, for a couple of years before I switched back to agriculture. And in that meantime, I got more exposed into all those different CAD programs and whatnot. I had a buddy, he was a couple years older than me, he already had graduated. He was working as an engineer, and he had a 3D printer. And so he kind of showed me what it was. And for people who don't know what 3D printing is, think of it like, a hot glue gun, that, mom or grandma uses for arts and crafts, right? So it's like a hot glue gun on an arm, right? So it's just moving around and just laying down plastic and whatever you're trying to print. And so, it's just laying layer after layer after layer, of plastic. And you have these big spools, which is called filament. There's whole different types of filaments out there, depending on the use case. The ones that I primarily use are PLA, which is the most common, simplest, and cheapest one to use. But it's got some things that it's not good for, like heat, and it's not as durable. And so you get some higher temperatures, it can warp and stuff. So then I use another filament. It's called PETG. Basically, it's more waterproof. It can handle higher temperatures, and so it's more durable. So it can handle different applications better than PLA. So I always thought that being able to create something on the computer and in basic terms have a printer right next to you on a desk and be able to print something and go from design to product in, whether it's 2 hours or 12 hours and have something. I was always just fascinated by that. And so, quite a bit of time has elapsed since then. We got into a new house and, basically it's our forever house, and got into a spot. And I was like, I had gotten a bonus from work, and I was like, yep, it's time. I'm going to finally get a stinking 3D printer. Right. And so that was kind of how I got interested into 3D printing to begin with. And, so, I mean, my CAD skills are pretty basic. Because I'm not an engineer, I don't practice with it every single day and stuff, but it's, it gets me to where I need to be. I don't ever get stuck in the wonderful world of YouTube. Can help you if you do. But, and then how that kind of married, I just thought it was cool. I could print random things, blah, blah, blah. This would be a fun thing to have. And didn't really think of like a business. And I was like, but there was always that potential there, because I knew some people that kind of did some side hustles or Etsy shops and whatnot with them. So, so I got it. And like a lot of people, right. You watch School of Knock and all of Dudley's videos on how to work on bows and stuff. And so, for me, there was always one bow shop around that I went to ever since I was a kid, all the way up until up until a year and a half ago now, I believe. Problem was, it was 45 minutes away. And like, when you have a family and you got to drive 45 minutes, then you have to shop for a couple hours and a 45-minute drive back, you don't have a happy wife, right. To go there all the time, it just takes a lot of time. And I was like, I got to start doing this myself. And I've always been that kind of guy where I like to DIY and do things myself. Growing up, dad was a mechanic, and, farm nature, you always got to fix things yourself. You build it yourself, fix it yourself. And so, that's where I started to do, like a lot of people, you start with arrows. I started building my own arrows, and then it led into actually working on my own bow and stuff. And it was all because of freaking Dudley, right? Yeah. And so I saved up, got a press, got an easy green press, and so now I could do everything myself, as far as working on the bow. And then actually since I've had the press, that shop had closed down. The owner, unfortunately, did get COVID and passed away. He was an older gentleman, 70s. And then there was another shop nearby They closed up. The guy had some health issues and just wasn't able to run the shop anymore. And so now, like, the closest shop is literally like an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
And so it's out of necessity to have to work on my own stuff. And thankfully, you know, you got Lancaster and people that you could buy everything you need from. The only thing that stinks is that with the Hoyt is that you can't order parts. Like, you have to go to the dealer in order to get parts for it, which stinks. I understand why, right? They want professionals working on the bows and whatnot. Like, I totally get it. So it's not a knock against that. It just, you know, some companies you can get parts straight from them,
right?
Or you could buy them online. So that's the only downside to it. You know, if I need something that's, you know, specific to Hoyt, I have to go to the shop and I have to go get it. But outside of that, you know, and then we're kind of 3D printing and working on my own stuff. But you know, I only work on my stuff. Haven't worked on anyone else's. And so I just started seeing some things where it's like, hey, I could 3D print something to make this process easier, right? And so, you know, like one of the first things I did was it was an arrow holder for a scale, because I had a scale, but it had a really small, kind of a crappy holder. And so I made one that was large to where it would balance the arrow a lot better. And it was V-shaped, so the arrow didn't roll or move around. And so like did that. And then, you know, on the press, I created this, call a part spin. Essentially, it's just a magnetized parts tray. So when you're, whatever you're doing, right, working on a site, you know, tearing down a bow, you have a magnetic, obviously it doesn't work for aluminum, but for all your screws and stuff, you know, it's magnetic. So that way they're not dropping all over the place and whatnot. So I made that. And that just spooled into a bunch of other things. And it really came, whether someone had, and I started posting about it on Instagram, started on my personal page. I think I started posting stuff on there. And then I had some people reach out to me like, hey, it'd be cool if you could make this. I'd sit there and I'd think of a design of something to fit what they need. And so it's been a mixture of people reaching out and saying, hey, it'd be cool if I could do this. Can you make something that would fit, you know, that would help that? You know, like Jeremy from Antler&Up Podcast, he had reached out to me. He goes, I had a wall mounted storage. I call it a wall arrow cradle. Basically just a 2-piece design that I printed with a couple different sections to where you can hold your arrow. So you can mount it to anything that you want to. It's with screws. And Jeremy reached out and he's like, dude, he goes, I've got this cart that I use and it's all metal and whatnot. He goes, could you make a magnetic one? And I was like, heck yeah, man. And so I designed one up with magnets and stuff. And, you know, because he had that idea, I came up with a magnetic version of it. And so a lot of the designs came that way. So I say about half of them, someone reached out and was like, what could you do for this problem? Yeah. And then the other half was just me, you know, working on bows and stuff. And I was like, you know, it'd be really cool to have this. And so probably my 3 top sellers is what I call the wall arrow cradle. And it's a 2-piece design. So that way you could put it wherever you need to. And depending on the length of arrows, right? If you got short draw or long draw, you know, you could set the bottom that holds, you know, where your points would go at whatever you need to put it, you know, on the side of a bench or something. Like mine, I've got a cabinet. And so I put mine inside of a cabinet, screw it to a cabinet. And then the top piece, you could put it wherever you need to, depending on your length of arrow. So it's more of a modular system. And it's the same thing for the magnetic one, obviously. So that one's probably one of my top sellers. The next one is what I call just a straight arrow cradle. And it was, this was someone, it was actually Bubba from the Part-Time Hunters down in Florida. He's like, hey, I need something for when I make arrows to put them in. And so they're not rolling around and they can dry, you know, when I'm fletching or putting inserts in, etc. And so it's meant to be on top of your bench. And I made it fairly compact. So it's a rectangle. So that way it didn't take up a whole lot of room. And it could hold 5 dozen arrows in there. And so it just holds all the arrows vertically.
Yeah.
And it could hold 5 dozen like regular like hunting shafts, or it could hold 3 dozen of like target shafts. So the center section of it, I've got it fit so you could put whatever the biggest diameter target shaft is. I forget what that is. It's a 27 or 28. But it could hold those, or in those slots, if someone has like a micro and they've got a outsert or a half out, but mostly the outserts because they're just a bigger diameter, it could fit into those sections. And that's primarily just for during the building process of the arrows. And then the other thing, which is probably one of my most unique designs and still one of my favorite products I've made so far, is I call it the caddy, the easy caddy. And so what it is on the end of the easy green where your crank is, there's a section in between that post where you would put your bow in and where that crank is. And so there's an area in there, and I always thought it'd be cool to print something that would go in there that could hold your serving threads. You could hold your tools, and then it also has a small area for parts. And so it took me a while to get figured out, but what it is there's on those fingers on the press for the bow, there's a screw in between it where you could adjust the tension of this spring steel. And so I made it to where there's a tab that goes into where that screw is. I provide a longer screw, so it fastens on there with that. And then you've got 2 serving thread options to hold those. And then it's got an open area to hold tools. I always put like razors and screwdrivers and my knock pliers and stuff in this little area. And then there's a piece that goes over the top of that metal tubing that has those fingers on it. And then there's 3 different cubbies there to be able to hold whatever, spacers, screws, etc. Yeah. And so I call it a caddy because it's like a golfer's got the caddy that holds their golf clubs. Well, this is the caddy that holds your tools. Right. And so it goes on the end of the press. And so everything's kind of around that DIY, like whether it's working out, building your own arrows to working on your own bows. That's where it just kind of, I found needs myself, thought it was cool. And then I just started, business out of it. I'm not selling a ton of things. I get maybe a couple orders a week and stuff, but it's fun because, I work from home. I've got 2 3D printers now. I'm saving up for a third one to where I can do bigger prints, and they could be running during the day. At lunchtime, like I said, I had an hour break, and so I'd go down there and package up orders and get them off to the post office and stuff. And so it doesn't require a lot of my time to keep that part of it going because I work from home. And so I got that luxury from that aspect of it. And it's been fun, making some money. It's helped. I keep a lot of the money, obviously, to build up more material and inventory as far as the filament goes. And, I've been saving up for a new printer, this and that. It's also helped me purchase a few things that I needed when I went out west for that mule deer hunt and whatnot. And kind of also fuels my 3D printing hobby. Yeah. So it's been like a win-win. It's been fun. Yeah. And then going back to that grenade pen holder, I had seen so Black Rifle Coffee's got a grenade looking mug.
Yep.
And I was like, man, that thing looks cool. And so I basically modeled a pen holder. I actually got it right here after it. And it just doesn't have a handle. So, that sits on my desk. And just the utility of being able to have those at your disposal. The 3D printers are cool. So my wife's a teacher. She's needed some things, custom printed for her students' desks. So they didn't have like a cubby to hold like pins and stuff on it. So I'd like designed this 3D printed cubby that you zip tie to the leg of the desk, and it holds their stuff. And, they're fourth graders, and you think that something so stupid like that wouldn't get them excited. They were like, my wife brought in a prototype, and the kids were all asking for it. Like, when are we getting all these and this and that? And I was like, I got orders I got to print, but in between there, I've been making, inventory for it. And, the day she brought those in, she's like, you would have thought that, I gave them the day off of school. They were so excited, and so there's just a ton of things that you could do with it. Like, I've got 2 monitors in front of me, and I needed them elevated. So I 3D printed these stands and put a piece of wood across them, and it looks really nice. It's not some janky thing that I put together. Right. There's the application for it is just so vast, and there's so many things that you can print that you can't do with like a lot of traditional manufacturing because of the design or the application of 3D printing. And so it's, aside from even having the selling stuff, like I just love having the 3D printers just for all the utility it brings for other things.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's something cool. And I can relate to like the feeling of like, hey, I have this idea in my head, and it's cool to be able to just, I imagine you make it, and then there it is. And I got a guy at work. He's real into, I don't know if you got into this in the beginning, he's real into making like Dungeons and Dragons figures or something. But like the stuff that you can make on those things, like you said, you would think it would be kind of this like, oh, that kind of looks okay. You can make some really cool stuff with that. And you've done that in archery. And I don't know if Dudley uses your stuff, but I do know that Dudley hopefully listens to this show. Dudley, buy his stuff, man. but no, man, I really took interest in the stuff that you've created. And I wanted to get you on here for, like I said, just to catch up and just to kind of let people know that you do this and this is an option. Cause a lot of people that follow me do their own bow work, and the stuff that I can't imagine, having your serving rolling around everywhere. You've got 65 screws that you don't know where they went. All the way down to, hey, you work in an office, you got a cool looking pen holder. Like, you just offer a lot of cool things. So I really wanted to get you on here just to talk to you about that. Let everybody know where they can find you on Instagram and online. Cause I know after this, you're probably going to get real busy. Maybe not. maybe I'm making myself to have a bigger show than I do, but yeah, where can they find you on there?
Yeah. So, company name's Morr Innovations. So my last name, as you said in the beginning, is Morrow. And so it was kind of a play off my last name. So it's Morr Innovations. And so you can go to morrinnovations.com, or, Morr Innovations is my handle on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. I do have an Etsy shop. But, if Etsy does a phenomenal job with their, SEO and all that stuff. And so that's why I still maintain the website and Etsy, because I still get, I'll probably actually get more orders through Etsy just because how good they are with SEO and whatnot. But yeah, for simplicity, I always direct, if I talk to them, just go to my website. It's all the same stuff. Actually probably a few things more on my website than I actually have posted on Etsy, but.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on here. I appreciate you talking about all the fun stuff we talked about today. I'm looking forward to seeing just more innovations grow. It's awesome as I get into doing more bow stuff for myself, which I think I'm getting to that, what do you want to call it? Getting to that age as a bow hunter where I'm really taking interest in wanting to kind of do my own stuff. Definitely going to have to outfit, once I do get a press and stuff, outfit it with your stuff, because it looks like it'll make your life a hell of a lot easier. So, but hey guys, thanks for listening. Make sure you're following us over on Instagram. That's at Antler&FeatherCo. We're over on YouTube, which is also at Antler&FeatherCo, and you can catch us on Facebook as well. If you guys found some value in this show, if you feel like you learned some new stuff, if you feel like you want to pick up some new products for Morr Innovations, make sure you are subscribing, liking, follow, share, rate, and review, all that good stuff that you do on social media. When you guys rate and review the show specifically, it helps get it in front of more people, and that allows me to keep bringing great guests on the show And when we do that, that ultimately is going to make you more deadly in the woods and in your bow shop. So I appreciate every single one of you guys. An hour of your time to listen to me is not any small task. So I appreciate you guys spending the time with me. We will catch up with you guys next week. This is the Antler and FeatherCo Podcast. You are listening to the Antler